Matveev is our speaker today, and thank you very much to him. He is a very important specialist on Middle Eastern politics and especially on Syria. He is not only an academic, he is at the same time a very important diplomat working on the field as well. He is actually in MIGIMO. MIGIMO is a very important, influential academic institution in Moscow. He is teaching Middle Eastern politics, and he's writing as well on Syrian, Russian-Syria policy. Today, it's a privilege for us to have him in our Arab Spring Conference series, because between Turkey and Russia, Syria is maybe one of the most important issue, and at the same time, one of the most important issue of conflict at the same time. Because of that, I mean, we need to hear each other. We need to understand each other. And I'm sure, I mean, this academic event will help, at least in the academic perspective, to hear each other and to understand each other. And at the same time, I think behind the, I mean, Turkish-Russian misunderstandings in the Syrian politics, there is, as a main issue, there is the issue of Arab Spring. Yeah, Russia and Turkey have, from the beginning, had different approaches on the Arab Spring. Russia quite differently perceived the developments in the Middle East starting from the 2010. And Turkey had a difficulty to understand, to give meaning to the, I mean, Russian understanding or Russian approach to the Arab Spring, and at the continuation, I mean, the policy on Syria and Libya. Because of that, I think this is a big opportunity for us to hear and to understand the Russian policy, and Dr. Matveev is a very important and I think appropriate specialist to explain us. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Matveev. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor, and it's really a pleasure for me to speak to you, to such a distinguished audience. In my life, I've been to Turkey many times, across probably half of Turkey. But I've never been to traditional tourist places like Antalya, never. But I've been to many different places in Turkey, and I like your country. It's a very beautiful country with very friendly people. So today, I will use this opportunity to deliver your presentation on 4 issues, and I will just list them very briefly. The first one is which factors, domestic or from outside, inspired events of the Arab Spring in Syria. So the second one will be why rather peaceful protests of the Syrian uprising turned so quickly into a bloody armed conflict. The third one will be how do we perceive a dichotomy of the political process and the economic reconstruction in Syria. And finally, assessment of the current status and future perspectives of coordination between. So we will actually start from the very first one. I will try to switch now to the screen of my computer containing the first slide. Okay, and you just tell me if it works. Yes? Okay. Just a second. Okay, is it good? Okay. Is it okay? Okay. So we will start from the first topic. And I would like to say that it's very difficult now to say what was the first, I mean, what about the priority. And there have been very very active discussions inside Russia about that and outside Russia about which factors were the most important ones, outside factors, international or domestic factors in Syria. And people in Western community, well, they tend, first of all, to speak about mostly domestic factors, provocative factors of the Arab Spring in Syria and the conflict in Syria as a whole. At the same time, people in Russia, in our expert community, a lot of people, they believe that it was more about foreign factors that inspired the Syrian conflict. So in my presentation, I will try to deliver my personal point of view as an expert and as a practitioner. And I would like to underline four groups of factors of the Syrian conflict, I mean causes and premises of the Syrian conflict, mainly objective and subjective factors. These are two groups. At the same time, two other groups, domestic factors and international factors. So I will start from objective domestic factors. You see on this screen, there are also some subgroups of these factors. The first one is about the concept of socially oriented market economy. In Arabic, it sounds like اقتصاد السوق الاجتماعي. And it was about massive privatization, the reduction of the state's role in economy, trying to follow the Chinese model on bread before freedom versus bread instead of freedom formulas. And also here I mean democracy in its Western perception. It was about the growing gap in the distribution of national wealth. I mean here beneficiaries and losers. Also marginalization of large social groups, for instance, an educated youth in Syria. Also very intensive struggle for resources inside the local business elite in Syria, meaning this conflict for the resources between crony and novo-rich capitalists, they were called in Syria like Aulad al-Sulta, versus traditional entrepreneurs, and it led to the political polarization of the business elite in Syria. Also, it was very important to mention about economic imbalances and challenges, the low-level equilibrium trap. So this is a very interesting phenomenon. It means a gap between formal GDP growth and real GDP growth per capita. And you can see here, observing Syria, that it was a deep difference between these two key economic indicators. For instance, average GDP growth in Syria at the time, the beginning of the millennium, was 4.45%, while GDP growth per capita was only 2%. So that was hindering prospects for the sustainable economic development. Also, another challenge was about so-called institutional bottlenecks for the economic development and economic activity inside Syria. So it was about over-bureaucracy, corruption, poor governance, to economic stagnation at the time. Also, it's very important here to mention other challenges like hidden social tensions leading to the emergence of deeply divided society. You know that there is a theory of deeply divided societies, and Syria became one of these societies. So here I would like to mention a unresolved Kurdish problem, sectarianism. It's called in Arabic Taifiya, so that tensions on confessional ground. Also regionalism, so-called iklimiya in Arabic, which was meaning this negative phenomena about people coming from various occupying high positions coming from certain parts of the country. and also erosion of Ba'athist Brotherhood of Religions concept. In Arabic, it was called al-Ikha ad-Dini. Also non-functionary social lifts, and crisis of Ba'athist ideology versus the revival of Islamic fundamentalism. Also it's very important to mention here the dichotomy of official Islam versus the rise of Muslim Brothers' popularity among regular Syrian Sunnis, looking at the role of Islam in Turkey as a model at that time, and coupled with the unfulfilled dreams and romantic aspirations of people. So at the same time, I would like to draw attention toward another group of factors, so-called international objective factors. And here I would like to draw attention toward two of them. So informational openness, as one Western analyst called it, Syrians were catapulted from the era of 2 TV stations to the era of internet, cells, and thousands of satellite TV channels. Also, the erosion of traditional values, and integration of Western values, democracy and rule of law, human rights, and consumption society at the same time. Also, what I can call like a spirit of Islamism. It was like sort of defense social reaction of the traditional society to the challenges of globalization, in the form of archaization of values based on the social equality and rule by law, dating back to the golden Islamic times instead of rule of law, and some other things. Also, I would like to mention here negative impact of the global economic and financial crisis on pre-conflict Syria. It happened from 2008 until 2011. That meant the reduction of subsidies on fuel, the rise of poverty, meaning first of all poverty belts around big cities, and provoking inflation. So the third group of factors, which I call subjective domestic factors, were first of all about transfer of power from Hafiz al-Assad to his son Bashar al-Assad. So Syria found itself in transition. And it was really a challenge. It was really a challenge for the country. First of all, characterized by a temporary deficit of the new leader's personal charisma compared to his father, spread of dissident spirits and networks of private political mini forums that was called actually Damascus Spring, and it lasted from 2000 and 2001, one year only. The rise of criminality in big cities, 2004 and 2005, and some Syrians from all the populations, they start remembering the turmoil, the domestic turmoil at the end of the 70s, the beginning of the 80s, which was about the rise of Muslim brothers and their bloody clashes with authorities. And also the turmoil inside Syrian elites triggered by the Lebanese crisis. We'll talk about Lebanese crisis in more detail. So the old guard versus Bashar al-Assad's emerging inner circle that became clear during the Ba'athist, the 10th Regional Congress in June 2005, characterized by the fall of longtime Vice President Abdel Halim Khaddam. And there was also some conspiracy theory about the plot of Khaddam with in Syria. Also, this period was characterized by headline versus liberal approaches in tackling dissidents from part of authorities. And also, it's important to say, besides, in addition to political challenges, there were some other challenges, domestic challenges, like national cataclysms and like consecutive droughts during 2006 and 2010, and also boosting uncontrolled urbanization process and growing water scarcity in the country. So the fourth group of factors, they are about, I can call them like subjective international factors. Well, they can also be divided into three parts. So first of all, it brought about like Western occupation of Iraq in 2003, and it produced negative impact upon the economic situation in Syria, and it was about the loss of oil profits, trade temporary lowering down, inability of the Syrian community to fully absorb all Iraqi refugees after 2000 and after the occupation of Iraq. Also, hindering relations of Syria with the United States of America, accusing Damascus of radicalism and support of terrorism. And also the second very important point was about the Lebanese crisis from 2005, 2006, like Hariri assassination affair, spoiling serious relations with the West, with the France mostly, again with the United States. At that time, first economic US sanctions appeared, called Lebanon Accountability Act at that time, and also the erosion of relations between Syria and the Arab Gulf, mostly Saudi Arabia, erosion of Syria's image abroad, the withdrawal of Syrian forces from Lebanon in April 2005, and also provoking at the same time the spread of dissident ideas inside Syria itself. Also, I would like to mention here 2006 Lebanon war, leading to the enhancement of the so-called axis of resistance with Iran and Lebanese Hezbollah, also being a spoiler of Syria's relations with the Arab Gulf. Sunni monarchies like Saudi propaganda started depicting Bashar al-Assad Syria like an Alawi proxy of Shia Iran. And finally, the third point is about Syria becoming a part of the Arab Spring, meaning the proliferation of protest experiences, uncensored communications, especially among the Syrian youth. So after my presentations, I will be more than happy to answer all of the questions. And now I will proceed to another topic. So why it was about so quick escalation from rather peaceful protests on the streets to the real escalation of hostilities across the country, leading very quickly to the outbreak of the civil war in Syria. So covering the period from 2011 and until 2013. Here you can see on the table, this picture showing the main problems for Syria at that time. You can see on the periphery, so you can see in red the supporters, foreign actors supporting the Syrian authorities, and quite on the opposite side in green, foreign actors supporting the Syrian opposition. So you can see among the supporters of the Syrian authorities, Russia, Iran, Lebanese Hezbollah, and China. China mostly diplomatically, not on the ground at the time. On the opposite side, you can see Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, the European Union, and the United States of America. So the involvement, the interference since the very beginning of these foreign actors, that was which I call the internationalization of the Syrian conflict, which was one of key factors for so quick transferring from peaceful protests to the bloody civil war. So you can see here events like the failure of Arab League peace plan, which happened from December 2011 and until January 2012. Also, another called Kofi Annan peace plan that happened a little bit later, from March to June 2012, but shortly after the outbreak of the Syrian conflict. Also, Republic, meaning first of all the suspension of its membership at the Arab League, which was recognized as a very hurtful act by Damascus, always pretending to play a leading role in the Arab world, and also sanctions against the Syrian authorities established by the Western community and also within the Arab League. From the opposite side, you can see Russian-Chinese vetoes on Syria at the UN Security Council. starting from October 2011 and then proceeding to February 2012. And also at the same time, a little bit later, the deployment of Hezbollah militants in Syria, along with the growing Iranian military aid to Syria, starting shortly after the outbreak of the conflict. So this was some sort of combination, but this factor can be called, again, I would repeat, the internationalization of the Syrian conflict, very quick. Then you see in this ring inside opposition and loyalists. So starting from the loyalists, I would like to say that it was first of all about the failure of the official carrot and stick tactics starting from March 2011 and lasting until July 2011. So the abundance of this extraordinary regime established after coming Bassist into power, but it was done, but I think it was done too late. Also, governors were expelled from, first of all, from Dera, being responsible, bearing personal responsibility for the outbreak of hostilities on their governorates, but again too late. The government also there was the government changed, but at the same time, I would like to say it was too late. And in parallel, the authorities tried to use also stick, like trying to put pressure on the protesters in Dera, using army, even tanks on the streets. Then they left Dera in May 2011, but it was really a very bad blow on the image of Syrians, of the Syrian state inside and outside the country. At the same time, I would like to mention the failure of the national dialogue. It happened in July 2011 when then Vice President Sunni, Vice President Farouk Shara tried to launch this national dialogue with the Arab tribes and other forces trying to reach reconciliation, quick reconciliation after the outbreak of the conflict, but it failed, again, largely due to the vast internationalization of the conflict. Also, I would like to mention here the creation of the National Defense Forces and other loyalist militias, which happened in 2012. So again, that was a step toward the military escalation in Syria. But at the same time, from the side of the opposition, also I'd like to mention the massive defections and the creation of the Free Syrian Army in July 2011, which was not a positive step in hindering possibilities of peaceful reconciliation. Also, foreign support of the opposition, I mean the creation of Syrian National Council in Turkey, which happened in 2011, and etc. Also, radicalization of the opposition. Here, I mean infiltration of foreign jihadis coming from other places in Syria, which finally resulted in the creation of Nusra Front and then Daesh. What happened on the ground? Quite logically, people started disappearing from both confronting sides, atrocities. Syria witnessed atrocities across the countries, along with the real cleansings. For instance, the Hula massacre, which happened in May 2012, and also failed ceasefire attempts, numerous attempts across 2011, 2012, which led to the domino effect of mutual hatred among Syrians. So I'd like to say that actually outside and inside logic of a rapid turning of the Syrian conflict into a bloody civil war. So it was a combination of domestic reasons and mounting hatred and the logic of civil war altogether, without a factor like internationalization of the conflict. Here we come to the third topic. So you can see on this table the golden mean between the Syrian peace process and Syria's economic reconstruction. It's more updated topic now. So the golden mean you can see in the middle here. So it consists of various aspects, starting from the creation of favorable conditions for the return of Syrian refugees. It means, from another side, from Syria's economic reconstruction, unpoliticizing of all of Syria humanitarian aid with respect of Syria's sovereignty. At the same time, you can see a restoration of economic unity of the country and the economy playing a role of a locomotive for political change. That means two possible scenarios on the political screen, like federalization of the state and or decentralization of administration. Personally, I believe that the federalization of the state, unless now it's improbable, unlikely, it's more likely about the decentralization of administration. And there are some signs from Damascus coming, signs about their will to improve the role of municipal councils and municipal authorities, meaning in reality decentralization of administration on the ground. Sequential lifting of anti-Syrian sanctions needs to be coincided with the inauguration of comprehensive and inclusive national reconciliation process, and Russia plays a role here, trying to organize different formats and congresses like Sochi Congress to put forward intra-Syrian dialogue. Also finding common grounds at Syria's economic recovery, meaning unpoliticized consortiums for realizing concrete and profitable economic projects. Also offshoreization of Northeast, North and South. There are rumors about that in the air already after talks of the Russian foreign minister in the Gulf with his counterparts mainly from Qatar, and also consigning with ensuring international consensus on Syria's post-conflict reconstruction using different formats. Here I would like to mention Iran, Russia, Turkey format, and newly established format, Qatar, Russia, and Turkey. And finally, we come to the fourth topic, which is about modalities of Russian-Turkish cooperation in Syria. Generally speaking, I would like to say that in general, our cooperation is not bad. Definitely we have common grounds and discrepancies, but generally speaking, again, I would like to put a positive evaluation mark. That does not mean that there are no prospects for the further enhancement of our coordination in different spheres. And here in this table, you can see different opportunities for that. So in the political sphere, you see spheres, geographical areas, formats, multinational formats, and content for these spheres. In political sphere, meaning coordinating on Idlib in northwestern Syria, I can mention here bilateral format, like bilateral contacts between Russia and Turkey. And here it's very important to mention personal diplomacies of our presidents, President Putin and President Erdogan. And also at the same time, speaking about Idlib, it's inevitable also to use Iran, Russia, Turkey format, meaning the escalation zone regime, because Idlib, as you know perfectly well, was one of 4 de-escalation zones established in May 2017 in Astana. So here I would like to say about future of Idlib, preventing of a Gaza Strip scenario with concentration of radical forces on a small strip of land, and you can find this scenario in various scientific researches right now, with alternative reunification of so-called small Idlib with the territory of the Syrian Arab Republic as a province with a special status, or its inclusion into the northern buffer zone with formal border presence of the Syrian authorities, as it happens in the north of Syria right now. And also in economic sphere, I would like to mention that it's applicable to the buffer zone is northern Syria in the format of Qatar, Russia, and Turkey, promoting the economic reunification of all of Syria including re-establishment of links between the Kurdish parallel economy in North and Eastern Syria administration with Northern Syria and the rest of the country via offshoreization or fulfillment of joint economic projects like oil extraction. And you remember, by the way, an initiative put forward by President Erdogan about joint economic projects in the oil sphere, in the oil sector in Syria. Also, speaking about Paul Neal and security dossier, also applicable to Idlib and buffer zone, I would like to mention a direct bilateral Russia-Turkey format with ad hoc contacts with the United States in case of the buffer zone in northern Syria, aimed at coordination and preventing radicalization of the Syrian opposition in Syria, first of all, meaning small Idlib in particular, as well as transfers of Syrian jihadists to the outer world, other zones of conflict like Libya, Karabakh, etc. And also security issues like joint patrolling, Russian-Turkish joint patrolling, avoiding military incidents with the US contingents in northeastern Syria. Here, I would like to actually to emphasize that my general evaluation of our coordination is not bad, so it's a positive mark. Now, I will be more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Matveev. This is, from our perspective, I think it is very enlightening. But maybe I can start with the question and we can continue with the questions. Mostly, and we have 26 participants. Mostly they are our PhD students. We are also making a online streaming on YouTube. It means that we have a much more, bigger audience, I hope. And this is very important issue. From this perspective, I hope to have an influence, an academic influence on the issue as well. The question is about that. The Arab Spring, especially when we started this conference series, we underlined that was about a popular demand from the Arab street for prosperity and more democracy, because for a long time, the authoritarian regimes did not give enough space for the people on the Arab street, to have, their freedom and their way towards prosperity. Unfortunately, it did not, created the, the aims, the targets that they tried to reach. Unfortunately, the Arab Spring created most of the civil wars. But finally, sociologically, the issue, the case is there. And still, for example, in general, in Egypt, in Libya, in Syria, this demand is still there. Because now the people in the, Arab states, they are more aware of all the, developments in the world, from the internet, from social media, etc. And they want more space for their, life, for their own personal life. And there is not in a way of a mechanism to answer their demand. Finally, in Syria as well, if we will find a solution in Syria, we are obliged to find a kind of political settlement to give, an answer to these kinds of demands. I want to ask how, Russian foreign policy developing in these two issues. In the one hand, concerning this demand, for more democracy and prosperity. And secondly, how, the Russian foreign policy evolving, especially in Syria. What kind of, and you answered a bit, but maybe you can give some details. What kind of political settlement we can have at the end? Or, from Turkish perspective as well, the split of Syria is not a solution. What kind of, integral Syria can recreate it, restructure it, but by answering these kinds of demands. Oh, sorry, I should. I am very unexperienced in this issue. Niye açamıyor? Açıldı mı?
Now it's okay. It's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Answering the first part of your question. Thank you very much, Professor, for a question indeed. I think that there is no need to persuade from Russia to put a pressure on Damascus to understand that, certain changes and plain changes needed on the social landscape inside the country during and for the post-conflict reconstruction and the revival of political and social life inside the country. Certainly, there is some sort of winner's syndrome existing in Damascus, and we're dealing with it. But generally speaking, people, including the leadership of the Syrian Arab Republic, they understand that something needs to be done to move forward, and they cannot just to keep it as it was before the outbreak of the conflict. That's the first thing. For the second part of your question, I can just deliver my personal point of view, because it's very difficult to predict right now what can happen. A lot of people, they predict some sort of federalization of Syria in the foreseeable future. I am not among those people. I believe that the federalization will be some sort of a red line for Damascus, and there will be some concessions and real concessions and some compromises and common grounds in the sphere of municipal administration. It's not by case that recently Bashar al-Assad conducted even a large meeting with the heads of municipal councils in Syria, and a lot of things are being said about the urgent need and pending need to improve the functions and responsibilities, capabilities of local authorities across Syria. Because in my view, that provides very good common ground for finding political compromise, reshaping of a political landscape. Definitely that needs, in my personal view, to be reflected clearly in the new edition of the Syrian constitution. And by the way, certain territories and regions in Syria already have got experiences of influential local councils. If you take 3 parallel economies existing right now in Syria, in the northeast, the north and east Syria administration, and also in those territories formerly ruled by the so-called interim government of Syria, and territory of so-called Salvation Government of Syria in Idlib, also formerly run not by jihadists, but actually by civil administration and also by local council. So these territories have got big experiences in local administration. So I think this needs to be taken into consideration by the central authorities in Damascus. That's a very important point in terms of policy. Here, I would like to say that economy will not be like a supplementary factor, but it will be a major driving force. Economic unity of Syria, all of Syria, and then probably that will lead that would lead to some other improvements, meaning the reshaping of the post-conflict political landscape of Syria, mutually beneficial, taking into consideration also interests by opposition groups from various parts of the country. Yes.
Okay.
Did
Thank
I
you
answer
very
your
much.
question?
Yeah, thank you very much. We have a question from Fahrettin Gök. I unmute him if I can succeed.
I have, by the way, I have a question.
Yes, the question, written question.
In chat. So I can answer this question first. I mean, from the chat.
Exactly.
So yes, so it's about the tribes, the Arab tribes in Syria, their role, and etc. So I would like to say that historically, Arab tribes, especially in the Euphrates area, have been playing a role in political and especially economic life of Syria, local economic life, and the same situation Syria continued witnessing the same situation during the conflict. And now, if we can speak about nowadays, definitely the tribes, they can play a role, for instance, in re-establishing economic links between, for instance, northern eastern Syria with the rest of the country, and for the fulfillment, identification, and the fulfillment of joint beneficially profitable joint economic projects, first of all in oil sector. And I think something has already on the way, been already on the way. And definitely, if you look at the peace process and different formats, in Geneva format, for instance, well, and this constitutional process definitely interests of the Arab tribes also been, their interests have been taken into consideration during this process. And there are very influential tribes which during the war conflict they created their own militias, and they were, some of them were cooperating with the Syrian Democratic Forces during fighting against ISIS during the conflict. So I foresee an important role of the Arab tribes in future Syria.
Okay, thank you very much. We have two participants who wants to ask questions. One is Ambassador Bülent Meriç. Bülent Meriç is a senior Turkish diplomat. He was ambassador of Turkey in Ukraine and Japan. Now he is in the faculty. He teaches in our department. Yes, Ambassador. I have a difficulty to open the video, and I'm so sorry, but I succeeded to unmute. Go ahead, please.
That is okay. You know, the participants may guess my likeness. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Matveev for his excellent presentation. It has been very stimulating for me as a retired ambassador who has interest in the Middle East. I have, by the way, I have had the chance to serve both in Israel and in Iran, and I am an exceptional diplomat in the service of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to have the experience of the two opposing states in the region. Dr. Matveev, your presentation has been a food for thought for my thesis, which was also linked to the Syrian crisis. And I'm about to write the third part of the thesis on Syria. A specific part of your presentation, especially the future of the Syrian political setup, is very much new to me. You mentioned about federalization of the state, and you mentioned that the central authority is not very much in favor of federalization. What does Russia has in mind as regards the federal setup in Syria? To be precise, how many federal units would there be in Syria if a federal constitution is agreed upon in the country? That is one aspect of my question. The second one is, again, a topic of interest for me and a novelty for me, is the status of Idlib. You know, Idlib is a very controversial part of Syria, which has been a subject matter of negotiations between Turkey and Russia. And in your presentation, you mentioned a special status for Idlib. What does Russia have in mind as regards the speciality of the status of Idlib? I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your question. I will start from the first part. Well, actually, as you may know, I think it was in January 2017 when Russia sent a draft of the constitution of the Syrian Republic, coming back to the pre-unification with Egypt official name of the Syrian state after gaining independence since the end of since the middle of the 40s and until 1958. So the name of Syria was the Syrian Republic, skipping the word Arab in it. So it can be easily seen that it's like pretty similar to Iraqi present structure with the Kurdish autonomous region in the north, Iraqi Kurdistan. So if it were about the future federal structure of Syria, it would have been like having autonomous Kurdish region. The question is how real is this scenario? In my view, it is not quite real because it's a red line for Damascus, and I don't think that Russia is ready. He expressed certainly my personal point of view, but I'm not pretty sure that Russia is ready to put such pressure on Damascus to persuade them to choose this scenario of federalization. What I think, I do believe that it's much more convenient for everybody to have strong municipal bodies in certain parts of Syria, because it will be like very universal for the whole country. So here we combine status of different territories with very strong regional elites, not living under direct control of Damascus for a certain period of time. And it's like Dara in the south with the Konaitra, and Idlib and northern part of Syria and northeast of Syria. So that means that in comparison with the federalization, which is in general terms applicable only to a Kurdish autonomous region, this could have become very universal for all of Syria. And the universal character means, in my view, more success. So I think that it will be much about finding common grounds with guarantees, with constitutional guarantees, not just by wording, about incorporation of these territories, which are already named to you, the southern part of Syria, Idlib, and the northern part of Syria, northeast of Syria, into one state, but with very strong economic powers, because on local level, because it's much about the division of profits, with very strong and shadow groups, regional shadow groups, and I think that central authorities, they will be unless they do not do so. You can see what's happening in the area right now, the rise of criminality and some mounting economic problems, even in comparison to other parts of the country. So that means that it will be definitely taken into consideration by the central authorities in Damascus. Coming to the second part of your question, I would like to say, Ambassador, that again, that's my personal point of view, based on my personal experiences. It has nothing to do with our current foreign policy doctrine. But in my view, there are three scenarios of future for Idlib. The first one is just Idlib will become like some sort of replica for Gaza Strip, with very radical leadership inside, local leadership with some jihadi elements, and it will be like another Gaza. I don't think this is a convenient variant for foreign actors, including definitely Russia and Turkey. I think another very highly possible scenario is incorporation of Idlib into the buffer zone, a re-establishment of links between the so-called interim government of Syria and with the dissolution of the Syrian so-called Syrian Salvation Government. So again, it will be like, since the very beginning, one zone, and but again with the formal presence of Syrian authorities there, as in the north. Checkpoints like in Bab el-Hawa, having representatives of Syrian authorities, but I think that at the same time, economic sphere will be highly dominated by local actors and not by the central government, because they do have real influence, and even people from jihadists, they need to take this into consideration. You remember these clashes in the streets in Idlib when they were trying to get more profits from Bab el-Hawa, from olive exports, and etc. People came out of the streets, and this was orchestrated by local entrepreneurs, shadow entrepreneurs, and I think this will be taken into consideration in future as well. So what means the specific status of this province? For instance, like adopting ad hoc economic program by the central government in case of the realization of the third scenario of incorporation of all of Idlib with the rest of the country. So that means the adoption of ad hoc economic program for economic and social development of Idlib, which is investing money in that, not just within the general framework of the whole country, but precisely for Idlib, and probably more money being invested in comparison to other territories of Syria. So that means the special status, economic status of Idlib, special administrative with very status with the influential local councils inside future Syria. I hope I tried to answer two questions, Ambassador. Thank you very much.
Of course, excellent. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Matveev. I have a question, and there I see our PhD student Mehmet Emir has a question as well. Let's ask these two questions, and you answer both of them, and maybe you can say also your concluding remarks. We planned, I know very well you are very busy. We planned for 1 hour this meeting. Okay, my question is that, if there will be a political settlement in Syria, for example, now in Libya, a process of, let's say, democratization started. I mean, they will make a law of legislation a law of election, and I hope in Libya, after all these developments, if these developments work as it is planned, they will at the end get a government elected by the people. Yeah, this is a bit a final, solution that we are searching as a political settlement. In Syria as well, this is the problem. Yeah, finally, you can choose a federal solution, or I mean, you can choose another solution. But at the end, do you think in Syria we will have free elections? Finally, because if I mean all the Syrian citizens vote, probably I mean the regime and the Baath party will lose. I mean it's well protected and well placed political position in the regime. If they are ready or not, if they are not ready, what kind of political solution that we can have at the end? This is my question, and Mehmet Emir asked his question, and you answered both of them, and your concluding remarks, and we conclude.
I have also two questions in, I have two questions in chat. So
exactly. Okay, you can answer also these two questions. Thank you.
Yes. Not to offend anybody. Yes. May I answer this question first, because it's more
Mehmet Emir also has a question. Doctor, you want to answer by one?
Yes, one by one,
okay.
Please.
One by one.
Okay, so I will try to be brief. I think in Syria, it's not possible to have all at once a political solution. I think it's about a multi-stage political solution, because the notion of free elections is a very relative one. You can have free elections in Tartus, and you can have free elections in Dera. You can have free elections in Suwaida, just 20 kilometers from Dera. And you can have free elections in Rojava, in Jazeera. So you will have different free elections, but you need to leave to make combination just for the whole state. Remember, this abandoning the apartheid regime in South Africa. Imagine if it were only about so-called free elections all at once, without taking into consideration the diversity of the local society. In politics, sometimes it's very important for achieving success to take into consideration the reality, not just wishful thinking, and taking into consideration very good goals and standards, international standards. It's always very important to take into consideration local realities. And local realities in Syria mean that they require a multi-stage reconciliation, reshaping political landscape of the country. Which is most important here is not just to stop, to move forward. The most important thing for me, just to avoid a stalemate at the Syrian peace process, just not to stop joint efforts in right direction. And then I strongly believe that the Syrians, they will manage to achieve this political, long-lasting political solution and political settlement of the Syrian conflict. That's about your question, Professor. So the first question from the chat is about Israel-Russia relations. It's about Russia's reaction to Israeli attacks on Syria. First of all, I would like to say that it's a very difficult situation. First of all, if you look at Israeli attacks on Syria, you see that mostly they're being addressed against Iranian forces on the Syrian soil. The Russian position is the improvement and enhancement of all state institutions inside Syria, and not parallel institutions like militias and etc. In strictly personal point of view, as an expert, I would like to say that there is some sort of discrepancy between Russia and Iran in this respect, because the Iranians, they support these non-state groups, and we do not. We strongly oppose non-state groups and their active role in post-conflict Syria. We stand for the improvement of state institutions, traditional state institutions, the sovereign state groups. So that means that you need to look at each particular case. And here we talk not only about Israeli attacks but US attacks as well. What we strongly oppose, military attacks upon sovereign state as such. So we do not support an idea that someone needs to be punished inside Syria for hostile actions whatsoever. But you need to take into consideration that again, these attacks, in many cases, I think in the majority of cases, there were ad hoc attacks being addressed at certain facilities inside Syria, but not Syria as a whole. This is my strictly personal point of view. Evaluation about the recent statement of US Secretary of State Antony Blinken on the urgent need for humanitarian assistance to Syria. Well, actually, the Americans, they have been among the leading donors for Syria since the very beginning of the Syrian conflict. Sometimes, in majority of cases, they were hiding behind NGOs, international NGOs or the UN, but still they were there. US doctrine was based on a few principles. Go local, bypassing central authorities. Go small, meaning just avoiding very big projects with the corruption and etc. Go slow in order just to make all these projects meeting the realities of certain historical periods. But at the same time, a big disadvantage of this American position was that it was very customized and politicized. So they were trying, for instance, supporting the Kurds in the north and the Syrian Democratic Forces whatsoever, at the same time turning a blind eye to the problem of blockaded the resort by ISIS, for instance, during the Syrian war. And it means that I'm just wondering, and we will see in the future, what was the real meaning of these words by Antony Blinken. So was it about some amendments of US policy toward the humanitarian relief for Syria or not? Or was it about just, the same position, but in other words? So thank you. And now I'm ready to answer for the final question.
Okay, the last question, Mehmet Emir.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Matveev, thank you very much for the nice presentation you have made. Syria has always been very important for the Russia in the historical process. However, especially during the Arab Spring operations, Russia was drawn into the swamp of the Syria, which was destabilized by the USA. My question about this are, how did you let America cause destabilization in Syria so easily? Second, how do you view the future of the administration problem in Syria? Will Assad stay or go? Third, what is the Russian approach to a future Kurdish state in the Syrian region? Third, what is the Russian view regarding?
Mehmet Emir, you are asking another, meeting.
Well, very precisely.
I think it is.
So last question, because this is so.
Mehmet Emir, we are at the end of the conversation. Thank you.
Yes,
Dr.
Professor,
Matveev,
I can just a couple of minutes. I can give answers very briefly. First of all, as for the Kurdish state, I think that's a mistake when people start saying that Syrian Kurds, they are willing to have their own state. No. Look at the map of the Syrian, so-called Syrian Kurdistan. They've been always two enclaves, even during the hardest times of the crisis, of the conflict, in Kamishli and Hasake. The airport in Kamishli has been completely run by the authorities during all of war. The Kurds were using and are using this airport at the consent of authorities and together with authorities, but for the checkpoint with Turkey, Kamishli is also under the authorities' control, always been like this. And there are informal relations between the Kurds and the government in the sphere of electricity, for instance, and purchasing, for instance, products, food products from Syrian, so-called Syrian Kurdistan. So it's not about the creation of the state of Syrian Kurdistan, never, and nobody wants it, and including the Kurds. As for the US, I have not probably have not got your question properly. Well, the role of the US in Syria, I would just always say only one thing from my strictly personal point of view. Syria have never been number one in terms of US priorities in the Middle East. They've been always together with the role of Iran, because the role of Iran is vital for the US administration in Iraq, for instance, even probably more than in Syria, and Syria is a part. Yes, there are some interests of US companies in the oil sector, Kurdish areas, but it must not be exaggerated. What is interesting, I've come across speculations in expert communities right now that probably one of impacts of coming into power of new Biden administration will be some pacifying gestures toward Iran in return of pacifying gestures from Iran in terms of confrontation with Israel. And it could have led to more freedom for the Iranians maneuvering in foreign scene if there is some ease for the sanctions against Iran or lifting sanctions against Iran. It could have resulted into more Iranian presence in Syria, for instance. This means the emergence could have probably meant the emergence of some discrepancies with Russia. But I'm not pretty sure, but that we need to wait, because it's not inevitable. It's probably one of probable scenarios. So we will see, we will wait and see. Thank you. So again, what's the last question?
Okay. Yeah, Dr. Matveev, I think we did a good job because Turkey and Russia is two important, actor, player, or state in this region. And probably, with these, two important state actors, that we will have some kind of, more positive, prosperous, peaceful days in the Middle East. But unfortunately, I think the governments or the politicians neglect the academic dialogue. And when there exists some misunderstandings or, conflicts, the academicians can play a crucial role, because we are talking more directly, more sincerely, and we use the same language, and we help, to understand each other and to clarify things. And I think today, with your enlightening and insightful presentation in Turkey, and we had more, enlarged view, clear view about Russian policy in Syria and on Arab Spring. And I hope this will be the beginning of our academic cooperation. Hope to see you, soon. I hope that, pandemic will end soon, maybe with the help of Russian, the Sputnik vaccination as well. To have you in Ankara, in our faculty as well, and to continue our academic dialogue in person and directly. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Matveev.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your remarks. Definitely, I'm ready for more cooperation with Ankara University, a distinguished university in Turkey. And well, I recommend those of you who speak Russian and can read Russian. Recently, there was publication of my book, Syrian Conflict in Russian, by the Russian Academy of Science. It's a complex work covering the majority of aspects related to the Syrian conflict. And you can probably, I hope, that you can find more answers and more questions, new questions from reading of this book. So thank you. And it was really a very good opportunity for me to deliver to you my messages and to exchange views. I hopefully that we will proceed in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye, Dr. Matveev.
Bye-bye.